Oh boy, free will, philosophy, and metaphysics stuff. Picking back up where we left off last week. So if you have not watched this or that, and you've stumbled upon this, there's a link to the last one in the description of the video. Good talk, informative, and interesting conversation. This is the finishing of that, and then some more in-depth rundown through some of the specifics of free will, morality, stuff like that. We have a Discord. There's a link to the Discord pinned to the top of the live chat and in the description of the video. The Discord is free. It is just a bunch of us who like to talk about weird stuff and who have self-identified as heretics in the most positive possible sense of the term. We do a number of live streams every week on 2 different YouTube channels. Discord events page shows all of it, but every Tuesday or every Monday, we do one on my personal YouTube at Tattoo Theist. That's a topic discussion usually voted upon via a poll in Discord. So recent stuff, metaphysical, philosophy, and theology, philosophy kind of 101, an intro to all the names of Yahweh. What is hell actually like? Do Christians believe in purgatory? Christians in mental health? All kinds of stuff. And then the rest of the live streams, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, non-canonical, canonical, in that order, is on at Live Bible Study. So 3 live streams there every week, reading literally anything that we can get our hands on because we want to. Hey, Ruth. Yeah, good luck with the puppy dog. David, if you watch this later, you will be severely missed, sir. Tampa, I put the invite out if you want it. Ghost. Wait a minute. So a Christian author got swatted? I was looking at this right before we started. I know some like 20-something people have been swatted in the past in the past couple of weeks. But apparently a Christian author was swatted at his rural Alabama home. He believed the recent spat of false police reports made against conservative commentators indicates the blah, 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 blah. Okay, so he's not just a Christian author. They're trying to really butter this up. He's a political commentator. Well, that makes a lot more sense. Interesting. I wonder what the deal is. Oh, wow. Yeah, they went in hardcore there, didn't they? Sheesh, man.
Yeah.
Hey.
You think swatting should be considered terrorism?
I actually do. Yeah. I think just by definition.
Yeah.
It would be. Yeah. I think it's pretty obvious. I think it's tough. The whole terrorism thing, in my opinion, for Americans, I think is tough. Just because of what we've kind of socially made it to be. But if you actually just boil it down to like, well, what does terrorism mean? Then yeah. But I just fear that would then get abused for all kinds of other things that maybe shouldn't be terrorism. And I think that leads us down the path of serious abuses of power and Americans not being stripped of their rights. So I worry about it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is attempted murder. So what's the point other than to...
Totally.
Right.
Totally. I just fear if power changes, what would be deemed as terrorist then. And then if you know about, obviously, the rights that are stripped from an American if they're found to be a terrorist, you don't really have any anymore. So like the judicial process is kind of done. It's it's very different than if you have your rights intact. I just worry about the abuse. It's always easy to say when like people are in power that we agree with, but I always try to think, okay, well, would I still think this if the people in power were people I did not agree with? And that worries me.
As far as swatting goes, it's usually like one group that's doing stuff like that. So
for sure.
I don't see, if things were reversed, I don't see how it could be abused by the opposite side because the opposite side doesn't SWAT.
Right. And even if they did, swatting, I think, is a scenario where if you could prove it, like there was a video right there, he obviously has proof of it, and you have the 911 call. I feel like with swatting, it's fair because either way, they should go to jail. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, what side you're on. You go to jail.
Just the principle, the philosophy of swatting.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think swatting is an easier one. Yeah. But I know the like, what is terrorism actually has become a very, very hot topic. And I think generally speaking, it is concerning to me. But with something like swatting, either way, go to jail. Like, it's wrong, period. Should be illegal and should be considered terrorism, period.
Do you think, like, in general, political violence would be considered terrorism, or does there have to be some other component?
I think there has to be some kind of component, or at least we have to, like, objectively, or I guess subjectively, but agreed upon, draw a line of what is activism and what are things like the difference between peacefully protesting actually and rioting. Like, if we were to draw all of these lines and put them into law so that it was very clear, like the stuff that's happening with Tesla right now, one of them actually really close to us just had it happen to them. And everybody with Teslas where we live, because of where we live, has the signs on the back that say, like, I bought this before I knew he was a terrible person. I think if you were trying to intimidate people with violence, I think that fits the description of what terrorism is. I wouldn't say that about, like, vandalism, though. And I hear people saying that. I don't agree with that, I don't think.
Yeah, vandalism's, like, right on the line, I would say. Because it's not, like, physical violence, but it's, I guess you could say it's, yeah, maybe not terrorism.
But it's tough. It's tough. Because if you think back to, like, the Summer of Love, we had a lot of vandalism that you had the full spectrum. So, like, vandalism that maybe wasn't that damaging, the shop owners could fix it within, an 8-hour day, versus, like, their businesses being grown to the ground. And if you're, like, a local business owner and your business is burned to the ground, that's kind of terrorism. Like, you completely potentially destroyed their entire life, their kids' future. Like, you could have stripped all of that away. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Wild time right now, and probably just going to get worse with the summer coming.
Yeah, I mean, it fits in with philosophy, right? There's a lot of different ideas about what's happening.
It does, yeah. Yeah, it really does. Esmel said swatting involves possibility of DBC. I hate that y'all just want me to look stupid in public.
D by cop. You can fill in the blanks.
Okay. Yeah. I think possibility, and I think the important part of that is intention.
It's intention.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
It's not only possible, but that's why they're doing it.
Right. I think, for me, I think that's why I would classify it as terrorism, because it's not them thinking like, oh, there's a possibility. It's them trying to make that a reality and then probably being bummed when that doesn't happen. And so far, from what I've seen, the police, like, big pat on the back, because I haven't heard of anybody dying yet. And maybe I'm wrong, but I know out of, like, 20 something, I haven't heard of anybody dying. And, like, that's really easy to happen. And what a tragic, terrible thing. Scary stuff. But it does relate to what we're talking about. So last week, and rudely interrupt me anytime, but last week, I think we went through the first couple of these, but I figured restart the section because some of it feeds into some of the other stuff. So going through the free will. Sorry, the music drives me insane. Going through free will and divine sovereignty, and then some other things that are in line with it. So what is free will? Free will is the ability to make choices independent of external constraints. Theologically, though, it is essential for moral responsibility. And we talked about that. As God's justice depends, or at least from what we say, it depends on human beings being free to choose good or evil. Not all, because when you move into Calvinists and things like that, which we've also talked about, it's different. Then you have determinism versus free will. Determinism holds that all events are caused by prior factors, while free will asserts that humans have genuine choice. If God is sovereign, does he predetermine or predestine, is the term that we're used to in theology, all actions? Or do humans have actual freedom to make their own choices? And then I believe this is where we left off. So comparing the two most obvious and the ones that everybody really knows. Calvinism, the belief in predestination, among many other things. But in this context, predestination, where God determines all events, including salvation. So in a very briefly said, they believe that not only all things happen predetermined by God, but even the salvific process for humans is predetermined by God, meaning that everybody who dies not saved, God predestined and predetermined that they die unsaved, which I still to this day will never understand how you make that make sense with the Bible, unless you only use Romans, and then I can steelman it. If you're to use anything at all and Romans, you have a conflict. And if you use everything else without Romans, you have essentially Arminianism, in my opinion. And then bring in Arminianism, which is a umbrella term, because now it's expanded like everything else. But it is in opposition to Calvinism, theologically, where they believe in the idea or the concept of free will, where humans can freely accept or reject God's grace. And because of this, broadly speaking, in contrast to Calvinism, not all things are predetermined. Not all things were decided or predestined by God before the beginning of time. And therefore, and because humans have free will. And so our choices and our behaviors impact the world around us. And it's a butterfly effect, in essence. Philosophical perspectives. Philosophers debate compatibilism, where free will and determinism can coexist, versus libertarian free will, which would be human choices are truly undetermined. And then it takes us into morality and divine command theory. So objective morality, we've talked about forever, so everybody knows this. But objective morality is the assertion that moral truth exists independent of our opinions, independent of our cultures, independent of what we think. Morality is morality, period. If morality is real, does it come from God or another source? In our context, most of the time, we've talked about it in terms of like the golden rule and in terms of biblical morality. And we see that as objective morality because God is unchanging. Therefore, the morality that comes from God is unchanging. Divine command theory is a theory that states that morality is grounded in God's commands. What is good because God wills it, which is the same for some, and then some will extrapolate this into a little bit of a different version of free will, but it all boils down to the same. Euthyphro.
Hey, Joe, before you move on, could you put up the chat?
Oh, yes. Boom. All right, it should be up in a second when it loads.
Thanks.
Mikkel, hey. By the way, that was the 1970s? What was? Oh, they blew up the chem building at University of Wisconsin in the middle of the night and didn't realize there were chem grad students there. Oh my God. So that was some kind of eco-terrorism. Wow, I didn't know that. In the 70s, I guess that kind of makes sense though. A lot happened. A lot was going on during that time. Wow. That's wild. 2 commercials. Christopher Hansen. I instinctively went back to the thought of my great-grandmother swatting me and my uncles when we were playing around. Glad you went into more detail. Yeah, different, not that kind of swatting. Different kind of swatting. Euthyphro. The Euthyphro dilemma. Socrates, old boy that probably existed, but maybe he didn't, asked, is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it is good? One more time, for those who are slow like me. Is something good because God demanded it, because he demands it? Or does God command it because it is good? you could kind of put it like this: is which comes first, God or morality? Does God exist and
I
therefore
think
he
that's a
commands
false
it?
dilemma.
Say again?
I think it's a false dilemma. I think people are trying to break it into two things when it's just one thing.
Go.
So like God is good, so that is morality. There is no because, it just is. Like a chicken and an egg. They both came into existence at the same time because they're a concept, they're a system, a full system of reproduction. So you
Right.
can't have one or the other. It's just both.
I guess so. I would argue that, but based on what a lot of people think is they do believe one came first. So the idea, from what I understand it, and I don't agree with it. I'm more or less in the same camp as you, but I've heard it explained from some that there's this idea that morality existed independent of and above God, which causes several problems just to begin with. You can't really be a common Christian and believe that because it conflicts with everything. But if you're not a common Christian, then it's a question you have to ask. And their whole supposition is that morality is a thing that is above, outside of, and encompasses God. It's outside of him, so it's like a separate thing. From, I think, most the theistic views, I think you'd be right. But I think if you stray
That
outside
would
of
mean
that,
God is subject to a higher force.
right, which is why it doesn't work for Christians. But if you're not talking to Christians, it's a question that I feel like it's decent. It's interesting.
So who would say that morality is a higher force than God?
Mostly, and just non-theistic people in general. I could probably pull a few of them, but and again, it's just like philosophical terms of.
But that would make them theists. They were just calling it something else.
Well, right, sure. So let me try to think of how to explain it differently. That's the one, and then I'll try to find. There's a specific video I can see in my head where this was spoken about, but either way, like our context, it doesn't work. I don't think in any theistic perspective would this work. But if you have the conversation with people outside of any organized religion or belief in a structured view of a deity, where there are rules and most of the rules are surrounding and come after the idea that God is above absolutely everything, outside of that, it would work. Within that, I think you're right, and it's a conflation of two things. But what if God is not good and some sadistic weirdo? Well, right, that was kind of the Gnostic view, right? So I think there are those people that believe that.
Well, we know the universe is sustained, so I don't know if that could be evil, but not that simple, I guess. But
Well, no, what do you mean?
because love is a sustaining force, and like curation and things like that, you curate your garden, you make it flourish because you love it. So like, if God were evil, I get, I get you would be building something just to destroy it and get satisfaction out of the destruction, which
Yeah,
just seems like petty to me.
I mean, sure, but that's evil. I mean, we see that with people, though. Like people in their nature, we see people build things just so they can watch them be destroyed.
Well, usually what happens is someone builds it and then other people come and destroy it. I don't think people intentionally build something just so they can destroy it. That's weird.
Not many, but they certainly do. Like that's certainly a thing. Maybe it's not a common thing. Maybe it's not a popular thing. But there are certainly people who nefariously involve themselves in the construction of something and then destroy it because they gain satisfaction. And I guess you kind of have to break down, well, what is the satisfaction? Is it watching other people suffer? Is it just pure destruction, liking to see something be destroyed? I don't know. Like I agree, it's not common, but
True. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, you're right.
let's say it exists. But I with the God thing, I don't see why it'd be unreasonable to say that an evil deity created this world. Like I'm not beyond thinking of that as a possibility. Just from pure like observance of it. I don't believe that. But I certainly understand it. I certainly understand it.
Yeah, I could see why people would say that for sure.
Well, so like with was it Plato and the people who came after him, his disciples, their whole idea of creating the monad, who was all good, was this idea that the Greek gods were not good. That people were following these gods, and those gods were not good, and that they should, redo the religion to make it with better role models for gods than what these, Greek and Roman gods were. I mean, you look at all the hijinks that the Greek and Roman gods got up to.
So what do you make of that?
Well, so, I mean, according to Plato, we're able to discern whether or not the gods are good, and they decided, well, these gods aren't good. We should look for another god to worship, not the ones we've been worshiping.
Right. Right. But what do you make of that bigger picture? Like, what do you think about that reality?
Well, so, I mean, it does say that there is a, that just because it's the only God you know doesn't mean that that God is necessarily good. I mean, it's like, how it kind of one of those things that kind of blows up your brain, because it's kind of like this idea of how do we as these lowly beings know what is good? Can we really conceptualize whether God is bad or not? And are we able to understand morality better than God? But what if there is a bad God and a good God? Then how would we understand it if we're not able to discern the difference?
Right. Right. So I think we've mostly justified that, in my opinion, based on feelings. Not all, but it's certainly a portion, in my opinion. Beyond that, I think humans have kind of just relied on the history of deity and shaped everything for the most part based on that, and then conformed it with feelings, because certain things feel icky, like murder, and certain things don't. That's how I view it. Ghost.
Yeah, that's kind of like I guess my ultimate thing is if something basically feels like it really sucks all the time, then I mean, sometimes you get this whole Christian thing of like like Paul with the whole thing about life is suffering for what's good. That's the purpose of your life, kind of thing. But you'll experience joy from it or something. It's like, if you're not experiencing joy from it, if you think this really sucks, then is that real? And to me, I would say no, it's not. So
Feelings are subjective, but results are not subjective. Results are objective and they can be predicted and tracked. So feelings, I mean, I think pantheons are just ideologies. They're just a collection of ideas. And so to say are the gods good or bad, that's like saying our idea is good or bad. Well, we haven't made any progress. Like, what idea? And then why? And you got to debate why and the results and the feelings and emotions and all of that.
But wait, could you
And I
say
think they
that?
try to over.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
could you say that with God? Would it be the same thing? Like, I agree about thoughts. I agree 100%. In terms of the creator of the universe, the thing that you worship, the thing that is supposedly perfect, would you view that the same way? I don't know if I would.
That God is a thought?
No, that God is something that we have to that we can't just say is objectively good or bad. Are the gods good or
Oh,
bad?
I think the God, the creator of everything, is good.
Okay. Okay.
But that's the objective God, and then everything else is, and God has a pantheon. We call it the Ten Commandments. Those are 10 ideas that if you follow them, society will flourish, and if you don't, society will not flourish. And it's cumulative. So if you follow 9 and not 1, you probably have a decent society, but they all kind of interconnect. So the more you start subtracting them, the more the society crumbles. And I think pantheons are just a set of ideals. And the more people worship whatever set of ideals that isn't the 10 Commandments, they're going to have mixed results, and they're not going to be optimum.
Do you see any conflict with the 10 Commandments and the Old Testament as a whole?
I guess in general, you could say maybe. Like, it depends on what you mean.
You're right. I should be more specific. So if we were to take the 10 Commandments as exactly what you explained it to be, which I totally agree with, and then compare that with the depiction of who God was and what he did and what he asked people to do and how he engaged with them and how he told them to engage with other people, I think there's a massive conflict between those two things.
Personally. Sure, yeah, that could be, with the information that we have, yeah, I could see a conflict.
Would there be any world where you wouldn't see a conflict? Like if more data or information came forward, because we're talking about morality, like on target, could anything possibly be uncovered? Ancient texts, documents, whatever, that would ever make it morally justifiable what we saw God do and engage with in the Old Testament and with the morality that he gave us? Or is it just a matter of God doesn't have to play by God's rules? Those are for, the pantheon is for humanity, period.
The only thing I could think of would be time travel. Us getting to actually witness with a bird's eye view of what happened, how does it differ from how it was written down? And because I think it differs. I think, this stuff doesn't represent the actual reality of what happened.
Oh, I totally agree.
So,
yeah.
And I think, murder and killing are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And murder is the killing of an innocent. So if God's killing a bunch of folks that he deems guilty or not innocent, then I can't argue, but I wasn't there and I didn't see it. So
right.
I am comfortable with just saying, I don't know. But from here on out, I'm going to do the 10 Commandments the best of my ability.
Yeah, I agree. I just, I have a hard time with it. I have a hard time with it because I think. Go ahead.
What about the other 600? What about the other 650 commandments in the Old Testament?
I don't see them the same. I mean, I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't. I'm just one of the ones that doesn't. Like, I think I've described those as starter cups for planting plants. You put them in a starter cup, let them grow for a while, and then you transplant them out to your garden. And I think every civilization has a starter cup phase where they have rules and regulations that don't apply. I mean, every school has that, the kindergartners have to follow rules that the 12th graders don't have to follow. So that's why I see them different. I see the 10 Commandments as timeless, and I see those 613 as temporary. But that's just me.
I don't think they come from the same place, personally. I don't know how to
I don't either.
I don't know how to make it work. I'm not sure if I just don't believe that God had anything to do with them at all, which I'm very inclined to believe. Whether this was a later addition or whether this was something people just decided to put in there. But the way, if you've actually ever read it, and anybody who hasn't read through Mosaic Law, Levitical Law, do it. It's not that much. And if you do this stuff with us that much, like dedicate an hour and read the law. To me, it reads, and I've read it dozens of times, it reads humans trying to put law on culture, because it's almost entirely cultural. Very little of it, in my opinion, has to do with morality, spirituality, or anything like that. It's all just cultural law. And some of the craziest ones I pulled up just as kind of a taste. One of the most obvious ones has to do with fabrics. There's some argument about that one, so we'll ignore that for now. A rebellious son should be stoned to death. Do not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. What can I say on YouTube? Somebody who commits an S crime must marry his victim. Cut off a woman's hand if she grabs a man's stuff in a fight. Like all of it for the most part is cultural law. And I don't know if any part of me whatsoever thinks these things came from God. I think they were a part of cultural tradition.
Yeah,
But that's
addendums. They're like, because if you look at the 10 Commandments, if you follow them, all those 13 or 613 laws become irrelevant because you'd just be following the 10 Commandments.
Right. Agree.
I just remember hearing something one time where the first time he came down from the mountain, he didn't have the 10 Commandments. It wasn't until like the second time he came down.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I can't remember who. I feel like I listened to somebody. I don't know if I read something. I'm going to listen to somebody talk about that, but this would not surprise me at all because it just seems very much like it came from the people of that culture. Because to come from the creator of the universe, it makes no sense. And for this to be something applicable to all of humanity for all of time, it makes no sense. Whereas, like Go said, if you take the 10 Commandments and you take the Golden Rule into the New Testament, it's applicable to all people at all time, period. And it encompasses general and objective morality for all of humanity.
Were you guys talking about the 10 Commandments being given the second time he came down? So whoever was saying that, were they arguing that the 613 were given before the 10 Commandments?
I don't remember what the deal was. I just remember that the 10 Commandments, when he came down the first time, he didn't have the 10 Commandments. It just says, it says he came down with the law and he saw they had that God told him, go down, Moses, your people have strayed or whatever. So he goes down, he sees the calf
here I got you here. Exodus 19-20. God gives Moses the first set of stone tablets with the 10 Commandments on at Mount Sinai. While Moses is receiving the law, the Israelites make and worship the golden calf. Exodus 32, we get that. When Moses comes down the mountain and sees their idolatry, he smashes the tablets in anger. Exodus 32:19. And then in 34, God tells Moses to carve a new set of stone tablets and go back to Mount Sinai. This time, Moses himself chisels the commandments into the stone tablets, Exodus 34:27-28, but God still dictates the words. Moses brings them down to the Israelites, but this time he does not break them. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, just the story there, but that would be the way it was in the Bible, at least.
So the first
is someone arguing that? Go ahead.
The first time God wrote them, and the second time Moses wrote them, or something like that.
Correct. So first set written by God's hand, broken by Moses. Second set written by Moses under God's instruction, and then first set the Israelites in open rebellion with the golden calf. Second time, Israelites are now repentant and are ready to accept the new covenant, or the covenant rather. So yeah.
That seems like heavily symbolic. Like there's something we're missing with that, I feel.
I mean, either that or it's just something silly for a story, which is where my cynical brain goes. Because it's one of those things like, does it make sense for that to be the lie? Especially not to us, but to the audience that the authors were banking on reading this, which certainly did not extend into 2025. So if you're in the perspective of that audience, does it help if in your story you write that the set that was actually written by God's hand was smashed by Moses? Or, like you said, is that symbolic? Is there something...
I think they're trying to teach us something about Moses breaking them, but what it is, I mean, I don't know. I have to think about it.
Yeah, and then you wonder, well, was the explanation somewhere, whether this text or somewhere else?
Yeah, did that mean something back then? Like
what's
breaking a mirror and getting bad luck? Like that's a cultural idiom that we have, but like, did they have an idiom where if you break stone, or I don't know, it could be a million things.
So here's something, and I haven't read this, so bear with me. But breaking of the covenant, the tablets represented God's covenant with Israel by worshiping the golden calf. The Israelites had already broken their end of the agreement. That would actually make a lot of sense to me. So smashing the tablets was a physical sign that the covenant had been shattered. I think that explains it pretty well. Maybe it's
what is the deal with it being written by the finger of God the first time and being written by basically the finger of Moses the second?
Right. That's the other. Good question.
That's weird.
So in let's see. This is still about the smashing.
Boy, we're on a rabbit hole here.
It's impossible not to, man.
It is. I mean, this is good though. This is stuff I've never really looked at this before. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about the actual writing, but the symbolic nature of the smashing actually makes a lot of sense. And really, I feel kind of dumb because that was kind of obvious. Actually, the longer I think about that now. But the written by, I don't see anything for.
And that also seems important. Written by God versus written by Moses. It seems important, but I don't know what it means.
Right. Agreed. Let me just try one more rudimentary search here. So human response. Ooh, actually, baby, I like this. Hold on. This is good. The first tablets were completely written by God, Exodus 31:18, symbolizing the covenant was purely God's gift. Okay. And then they broke the covenant. He smashed the things. The second tablets, however, were carved by Moses, but still contained God's words in 34:27-28, which shows a shift. God initiates, but humans must respond. The covenant requires human participation. People must actively uphold it, which actually makes a hell of a lot of sense if you consider the first part where the people broke it, and so Moses broke them.
I love that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can
see that.
That's really interesting. See, rabbit holes are good.
Yeah, we got somewhere.
Yeah, it's not often that we do. That's really interesting. Okay. I hope everyone's paying attention. That's a beautiful, beautiful, small deep dive, but that made a lot of sense. All right, let me see if you guys had anything else, just cut me off. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here.
No, let's get back to free will.
Okay, the 600 laws have to do with how to live in society, rules and regulations, kind of like our city and local ordinance. I totally agree with you, David. That's exactly how I see that as well. Okay, so we were on the question of the urethral dilemma. The dilemma challenges divine command theory by questioning whether morality is arbitrary or independent of God. Then you have natural law theory. Aquinas, because he's who we were talking about last week a bit, argued that morality is built into nature itself, that humans through reason can understand moral law even without divine revelation. This, another way of saying this that's not really fair, but to picture it, is what I had said earlier, where many humans judge what is right and what is wrong based on feelings. A part of that has to do with this, but it is not entirely this at all, but it's a part of it. It's probably the easiest part to picture, but there is absolutely more to it than that. Secular ethics versus religious morality. So the question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's a cutoff somewhere in there between like transient feelings or like a day or a week or something and a sustained feeling. I mean, you've got like what happened to Job or whatever, which, man, that was pretty bad. But, I mean, if this had just gone on for like 20 years, then at some point you got to say, well, what's my basis of reality for this?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Because there certainly is a difference between like an emotional reaction to something versus like like you said, sustained, continually, perpetually felt feeling about something. I think that's an important distinction. Yeah. Because you might feel something about something one day and not feel that same thing, which is why I am a huge emotions hater. Not a fan at all, because I see them as fleeting. But there are certain things for sure that you feel a certain way about forever. Like, I don't know if most people would ever feel good about murder, not killing, because a lot of people are okay with killing, but murder. But apply that same thing to certain other things, and the emotions are like waves. That's a great point. Ghost said sustained feelings become personalities. Yeah, I guess so. And patterns, says Mikkel. Yeah, for sure. For absolute sure. Yeah. Yeah, great point, man. It was a great point. Okay, the question was, can morality exist without God? This is the classic, baby, for Christians, because it's a decent argument. It's a real easy way to back an uneducated atheist into a corner. Some argue that reason alone can determine moral principles. That would be the secularist view. While others believe that without God, morality becomes subjective. And that is kind of the argument. We've definitely talked about it before. But the difference between what is right and what is wrong just being, with no involvement, no thought, no feeling, no nothing on the part of the humans, versus is morality, and I would argue it's kind of what we have seen and what we continue to see in many Western cultures, is morality is decided upon by popular vote, or is just decided upon by who has the most power, what is the power struggle, and those people decide what is moral, which is obviously very dangerous. And
there's actually a poll out on YouTube today that asks that, is there objective reality without God? Can there be objective reality without God?
Objective reality or morality?
Objective morality without God.
Interesting.
There's actually a poll out. Last time I checked it, it was like 56% of people said yes. You can have objective reality without God.
I mean, I think they want to believe it. I wish there was a second round of that where they took all the people who said yes to that and made them explain how.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it sounds kind of like word salad when they explain it. Yeah, because a couple of them explained it in the comments, and it's very superficial. Sounds like very word salad.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, it's an infinite regression where you can never, because I've had that debate with people many times. And it's just never gone anywhere productive, because they have an end point. And, like, you can only infinitely regress so far. That's interesting. I got to try to look for that poll when we're done. But yeah, I think the explanation is where they have a hard time. I understand and I sympathize with the fact that people who don't believe in God want there to be objective morality, because we want to be able to say, as secularists, abuse of women in a certain context is never moral, ever, regardless of culture, because it is okay in some cultures, legally and morally. I think most people want to say certain things are objectively, no matter what, immoral. The problem is they have no way of making it make sense at all. It becomes absolute word salad, like Esmil said. It infinitely regresses to just this totally unintelligible back and forth. Go said God is the precondition for morality to exist at all. So the question is based on a misunderstanding of what or who God is. I agree. Yeah, I agree. A lot of them, the smart ones, will infinitely regress to saying or to admitting that something outside of our reality caused our reality. And they won't go beyond that, which is like, fine, whatever. Fair enough. At least you're admitting there is something objective and outside of us. Fine. Acceptable, I suppose. But then the conversation is done and over right there. But at least they're saying, I don't know. It's been interesting to watch the development of that. 10 years ago, when I was like diligently practicing apologetics, I had never heard a secular person or an atheist person have that conversation and have any kind of answer. I've heard a lot of them more recently get to a point where they say there is something outside of us. We just don't believe it's like God. It's certainly none of the gods that are a part of or are worshipped within organized religions, but they've admitted there is something.
I just posted the link to that poll.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah,
I have a comment. I actually have a comment on there.
I'm gonna try to find it. Okay. I'm gonna try to find it. All right. Well, free will, theological debate. We're not gonna make it through the rest of this again, which is fantastic. The question of free will versus predestination has divided Christian thought for centuries. Still does. Some theologians argue that God's sovereignty determines all human actions, predestination, while others insist that human choices remain free and meaningful, Arminianists and open theists and all the others. So you had Augustine versus Calvin, which we already talked about, emphasized that God's will is the ultimate force in salvation. You had Arminius and Wesley argue that God gives grace, but humans must choose to accept it. And then you have some modern views where scholars blend the perspectives. And this is what I was talking about earlier, when everything kind of comes together at some point, and then it branches again from there, in my anecdotal experience, proposing that God's knowledge includes all possible human choices, but does not force them. And this is, there's a semblance of like the open theistic view too, where God knows everything, God can see everything, and God knows what path you're going to take. But just because he can know it and see it doesn't mean you are forced to do it. You still have the option to do it. Compatibilism versus libertarian free will. Philosophers distinguish between compatibilists, free will, and libertarian free will. Compatibilism, free will, and determinism can coexist, even if actions are influenced by prior causes, including God's will. Humans can still make meaningful choices. Libertarian free will is where true freedom means actions are not determined by prior causes. If God predetermines choices, they wouldn't be truly free. The implications is that compatibilism, it supports divine sovereignty in a more pure sense, while libertarianism preserves moral responsibility. And I think most people kind of blend the two, from what I see. And then we've already talked about this, but morality without God. We actually just talked about this, I guess. A key debate in moral philosophy is whether morality requires God. The moral argument for God, if objective moral values exist, they have to be grounded in God's nature. Without God, morality becomes a subjective thing, which is what we're seeing. And the best example of this is other religions that not only legally are you allowed to abuse women and children, it is morally just to do so in many circumstances. Atheist perspective. Some argue that moral principles can arise from human reason, social contracts, or evolutionary processes without needing a divine source. This leads to what Esmil and I were just talking about, where they still can't make any sense of it down the line in the conversation. They just have to say, because it's so. There's no rational, logical explanation. Philosophical responses. Immanuel Kant believed in a moral order tied to God, while Nietzsche argued that rejecting God leads to moral relativism, which is, I'd say, mostly true. Philosophy and modern theology. Science and faith. How should theology respond to evolution, cosmology, neuroscience? And then when you put ethics and bioethics, how do we apply theological principles to things like abortion and AI, genetic engineering? These are the hottest things, at least in the circles I run in right now, is abortion just never ends. It just keeps getting hotter. AI, obviously, and genetic engineering is really big. The live forever crowd is growing from what I've seen. Then religious pluralism. Can philosophy reconcile different religious beliefs? Or is one faith ultimately true? This is my number one question in life. The future of faith and reason. Philosophy continues to refine theological thought, helping believers articulate their faith in an increasingly skeptical world, which I see, and it's good. It's good, but it's not perfect. Transhumanism. That's great. I should have put that in there. That's very true. Kat and I were just talking about that yesterday, with old buddy Elon over there. Yeah, great point. That's another big one. So abortion, AI, genetic engineering, and transhumanism. Those are the hottest ones right now, for sure. Some of the questions, and it's way too many to do, so we can pick and choose and whatever. But I've got some moral questions, and then I have some free will questions. So one of the ones from morality that I was curious about is, do humans have an innate moral sense, or is it entirely learned? I would say everybody says yes here, just based on everything else that has ever been talked about. I think the only time you'd get this to actually be an interesting conversation is if you talk to people who are not Christian. And then I would be interested to see what people have to say about that, whether it's innate or whether it is a learned thing. I'd probably think most secular people would say it's learned, but you'd still have a really hard time making that make sense. Okay, there was another good one though. Oh, this is interesting. Does moral responsibility require free will? Does moral responsibility require free will? That's an interesting question. For many obvious, maybe, but it's an interesting question. The difference between legality and morality is another interesting question. Should all things that are immoral be illegal? Should they be the same? Or, and I love that we kind of talked about it, like, is it more or less the difference between the 10 Commandments, morality, and Mosaic law, legality? Should they both exist independent of one another, but somewhat tied, I guess you'd have to say. Go said free will is the sorting algorithm. Matthew 13:30 can't come about without the free will program installed. Separation based on belief about X, Y, and Z. Let me grab that. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. Free will as the sorting algorithm. Can you explain that more?
Back to the sorting hat from Harry Potter.
What?
Yeah, it's hard to get away from it.
What does that look
free
like?
will, you can't. What does it look like?
What does
like
it
on
look
a psychological level or a societal level?
Societal level. Societal.
Okay, so take any controversial topic ever. You're gonna have, this group of people that believe this about it, and another group that believe that about it. Those people that believe antithetical things about whatever the subject is can't coexist because it's mutually exclusive. Their beliefs are mutually exclusive. So they have to be separated somehow. And their beliefs only come about due to free will. If they were robots, they would all believe the same thing.
Right.
So free will is what's required to sort people. That's why we have it. It is the filter.
That's so interesting. The filter is a perspective I've had for this for a long time. The sorting algorithm, I had never thought before. I think you said it a couple weeks ago too. It's a really interesting way to put it. It's very accurate. I think it's even possibly a better explanation than the filter. It's easier to picture.
Yeah.
It's easier to understand.
It is. But I mean, that's what a filter is. It's sorting. But yeah.
I think maybe just the. Well, no, I guess not. Yeah, I don't know.
I can't unsee this. Like, this is just, it's so obvious to me that this is what's actually going on and why we have free will. So the Calvinists are just wrong. Like, it would be like God is writing a movie or a novel that isn't participatory, but I think God wrote a Choose Your Own Adventure, which sorts people into camps. And that's why a couple of weeks ago I brought up a Rorschach test. That's another sorting algorithm.
Yeah.
It's a visual one.
Yeah.
Based on, childhood trauma, etc. Like, people are being sorted from birth. till death.
Do you think any of that is just micro? Do you think it's micro consequential at all? Or is all of it kind of macro? Everything is happening from a macro for good reason with intention. Or do you think some of it is
Well, in a
irrelevant?
universe of nesting dolls, there is no micro and macro. There's just, I get what you're saying, but it's both. So on our scale, it's happening. So I actually, what do you mean by micro and macro before I try to?
I'm trying to think of a good example. So
like adultery. If you don't get caught, it's micro. If you do get caught, it's macro.
No. So
I could see the household as micro and society as macro, if you want to look at it like that.
See, no, I wouldn't even put it like that. I think I'm glad you asked then. So I would see both of those as macro, personally. I think when I say micro, I'm thinking if you extrapolate the fractals all the way down, I think you do get to a point where the things that are happening are irrelevant, where the patterns that are seen are irrelevant. I think they're more just a consequential effect of larger things happening. So no, I think like society is macro. How society affects the family, I think, is macro. How the family might affect like the pets, maybe micro, but I'd say even that is still macro. But maybe then how the pets, because they've come inside over years, have impacted insignificant insects on this planet. Not significant ones, but insignificant ones. I see that as micro. So like anything that small where nothing is really impacted, largely. Nothing macro is impacted by the micro. Those things. Do you think anything that happens to that degree is intentional? It's a very microscopic question. It's something that I've asked.
Oh, you're talking like food chain kind of stuff.
Yeah, but all the way at the bottom, where all of the intentional, meaningful things have been purposely done, and it's the butterfly effect that goes on after that, the ricochet. Does every bounce of the ricochet matter? Is it intentional? Or at a point, once the thing that we tried to do, that God tried to do, is done, the ricochet is just what the ricochet is. It's inconsequential to the greater happenings.
Yeah, I do see what you mean. I'd have to think about it a little. What was the question, though?
Yeah, I guess, do you think every ricochet after the shot is intended and matters?
Like, is it calculated by God before it happens?
Yes, yeah. Is it intentional? Is it for a reason? Or do some things just happen because of the thing God did intend to happen?
Well, I think there's two things going on. I think we are conscious beings trapped in these bodies that can make choices, and even more importantly than making a choice, we can have a belief about the choice we made.
Right.
And regret it or whatever. And, some ant that's climbing up a mountain in Malaysia somewhere doesn't really determine anything regarding that. But that's the machine that we're in. The machine has to be perpetual and function without input, like a Rube Goldberg machine, but in a circle. So that isn't, I don't think that is conscious. I think that's there to facilitate our being alive so that we can make choices.
Okay. Yeah.
We're in a very complicated like sandbox.
Yeah. That's about how I see it. Yeah. I agree.
I mean, that's the only way I can really conceive of it.
Right. I mean, otherwise it makes no damn sense whatsoever to me. That's the only way to make it make sense for me. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. I've heard different answers to that, but it's interesting. Yeah. Mikhail said, like Go said, God wants each and every one of us to have our own adventure. Yes, that has always been my favorite way of explaining. For me, it was explaining open theism, but it is the idea that it's a choose your own adventure book. Everybody gets to choose, but God knows all of it because he wrote it within that perspective. But there's been an argument that if God knows all of the possibilities, do you actually have free will? And I've never fully got that, because to me, it is still obvious. But it's been more than one person that, like, I know personally who has had that argument. And it kind of like, I've struggled to try to make sense of the argument. But because I've heard it from more than one person, smart people, I wonder what I am missing with that argument. If God can see it all and knows all the possibilities, does that in any way strip free will? And I don't know. I mean, I know it's no, but I want to understand what the people are thinking about when they ask the question. And I just don't have a hard
I
time with
think
that one.
God cares more about what we believe about something rather than if we have total control over our choices that we make. Because it could be argued that people are on autopilot, a lot of people, but they can still have an opinion about what it is they're doing, even if it doesn't kind of match their outside persona. And that's what regret is. That's what shame is. It's like a dissonance between what you're doing and what you believe.
Yeah.
So if God was just puppeting us, shame and guilt and that kind of thing wouldn't exist, I don't think, would it?
They wouldn't make sense. Yeah, I agree. It'd be
So what side do you come down on as far as like if God can see everything and knows everything that will happen, you believe we can still have free will or we cannot have free will?
You do. That's my view. Is that just because God knows every possibility doesn't mean he's enforcefully acting through people to carry out possibilities. The knowing of something doesn't mean you are directly involved in the happening of something, is how I described it to them. That's the way I see
I'm fully
it.
on board with that.
So it's like the difference though is like knowing every possibility versus knowing every outcome. If God knows every outcome,
But that's still not
have free will.
That's not forcing though. Just because I know every possible outcome of Ghost's life, I can sit back and do nothing with the knowledge. I can know the future, I know. But it doesn't mean I did it to him. It doesn't mean I got involved in that human, Ghost, and helped him or pushed him or manipulated him or drove him into going the way that I knew he was going to go. I could sit back and passively watch that.
But if you know everything that's going to happen to Ghost, then that means that Ghost has no other choice than to end up at that spot that you know he's going to end up at. He cannot choose to go another way.
Well, we're talking about like two different timelines now. Ghost in the beginning had a choice. Just because I know now what will happen later doesn't mean he didn't initially have the choice.
No, because if he made another choice, then you would know the other thing that he did rather than the thing that you know that he did.
Well, I'd be wrong. I think what your point is, because I had this conversation with them too, is it brings into question God, what God knows and how, is to me what that brings into question. The logic on its own, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, what is it? Like in quantum physics, they talk about spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
Except it's over time.
Right. It becomes problematic. But for me, and I'm always in the minority, and I am on this too, it brings into more question of God. What is actually God? I question that before I question what you were just talking about. The timeline issue. I don't struggle with the timeline. The timeline to me still makes sense. But I've gotten that question a lot. So obviously I'm in the minority with that, as usual.
It also boils down to, are we all God having an experience, a human experience?
Yeah, right.
Because if that's true, I don't know if it's true, but if it's true, then that could be an explanation as to how God is omniscient, because he's in all of us and he's seeing everything through us, and it's all being kind of sent back to a central database, so that central database is omniscient because it has tentacles that are attached to every conscious mind in the universe.
Right.
I don't know.
That's kind of what Christians believe. They just would never explain it like that. But in a sense, that's what they believe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's tough.
It's like our brain there is something in our brain that is aware of how our kidneys are functioning right now.
Mm-hmm.
But our front-facing consciousness is not aware of that.
Yeah.
So like it's something like that. It's just on a universal scale.
That's interesting, actually. So like God's knowing of all things isn't always conscious or active, but it's more of a passive, inactive, subconscious knowing. Is that kind
I
of what you're
think it's
saying?
mathematical. It's like if you do this, then this is going to be the result, and he can extrapolate that through millions of permutations, like playing chess. Like he can know what's going to happen based on what you did 5 years ago because he can calculate that, and we can't. So we're limited in our perspective, but God isn't. So that's how I think God can be both omniscient and not force us into any choice.
Well, wouldn't that only make sense if he couldn't just directly see down the timeline to what you would do? Like, is math required if you could see down the timeline?
That's what they call the perfect chess player argument.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I just kind of thought of that.
God is like the perfect chess player.
Yeah. I don't know. I see those two different things.
It can make sense. Like all of these we're just speculating and trying to figure it out. But that's one way, I guess. Maybe it could make sense. But I also feel that it's incomplete, and I'd have to try to map it out better.
Yeah, that's interesting though. The greatest chess player idea. I think you'd have to have one or the other. You'd either have this maybe in the moment mathematic number crunching God who's just able to process, like essentially AI, but actually AI, deep intelligence that could run all that data instantly and continually for each individual that is breathing and be able to project more of what's going to happen rather than know. Whereas I think like the normal Christian perspective is that he can just see down the timeline. Like the time means nothing to him. So what is then is now, and what is now is the future till your death. And so the whole timeline is just clear and visible. But it does bring into question what S. Mill came at me about. That is the question that I always get with that. And it's a fair question. It doesn't bother me personally, but I'm the minority. Craig said, many parts mostly unaware of each other becoming one thing. The analogy of the body. Yeah. It does never end. David said, in my opinion, realizing we exist in a time dimension and God exists outside of time. That's why free will and predetermination can coexist. I, sir, agree with you. That is simply put where I sit with that as well. I do have to roll here in 1 minute. So anything else? This was good. We did not finish, but we got really, really close. Really close. So I will repurpose what was left for another philosophy day. We'll save the notes. And this coming week, we'll run a poll like normal. So if there's anything else we want on the polls, I will bump the thread. If you want anything else put in there
right now,
we got a bunch. So if nobody puts anything new in, I will just pull from the list. I'm trying to think of anything that's come up repeatedly recently, but I'm not sure if there is. Nothing I'm thinking.
There's one thing I'll add pertaining to tonight's talk is that I think it's important not to think of the word morality as innately positive or negative. It's just like, think of it as pattern, an ideological pattern. And there are negative ones and there are positive ones. And I think God's morality is positive innately because he's God. But I don't think when someone says morals or morality, don't just jump to it being a positive thing because it can get confusing.
It's a good point. It's a really good point. Yeah. Very true.
Because people do that too much, and it's just like, stop.
Yeah, it's another one of those things that's been completely culturally destroyed, what the word means and how to use it in a conversation. That's a great point.
I think Western language is just on its last legs.
Oh, it's atrocious. It's got to fall. It's got to fall. I tell my daughter this all the time. I'm like, you need to learn this now, but you will not be using this by the time you are an adult. Praise God. There's just no way. This language is it's humorous. We've done a number on it for sure.
Yeah, that's all I'd add.
Beautiful. Well, anything else? Anything else? Say it now or forever hold your peace. I did bump the thread for Tuesday topic. Anything you want in that list or put on for this coming week, put it in there quick, because I'm going to put the poll up tonight or tomorrow, and then everything else is normal this week, as far as I know.
All right, everyone. Take it easy. Love you.
Love you. Love you. Yeah, everybody have a good night. We'll see you Thursday for the Book of Giants and whatnot. David, I'm glad you found the dog, by the way, my friend. Congrats on the dog. And S. Mill, thanks for popping in there. That was nice. Good to have you. Mikkel, have a lovely night, sir. All right. Love you guys. Have a good night.